Who do we got today? Sophomores. What's up? Um, so, slight change of plans. I'm just going to talk about this book, or at least the first few pages of it, because I was going through that. And if I start talking about one area, I'm going to want to do like basically the rest of the chapter. Um, so, in an attempt to be more focused on the things that I I can present, I'm just gonna stick with this. So, start with lesson number 1: preparation and form. So, true prayer. By the way, this book is by Romano Guardini, called The Art of Praying. And he also wrote a great book called, well, it's not really, yes, it's a book, but it's not like he actually went or had the effort or went through he didn't have like the intent at the outset to write a book. It's called Preparing Yourself for Mass. There are 32 like brief lectures that he gave to his parishioners before Mass, and that book is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. All right, so with this, so the first lesson is regarding preparation and form. So true prayer does not actually have to be spontaneous. I would say spontaneous prayer is great, but prayer which springs from our inner longing, this is a quote from him, must on the whole be considered as the exception. Okay, so you're going to have times where you don't want to pray. Excuse me. You're going to have times where you don't feel like praying. It's so to say that prayer must be spontaneous is, I would say it's probably akin to, since I'm not married, I'm speculating here. It's probably akin to a couple on their honeymoon frowning upon or looking down upon a couple of 50 years who aren't like just spilling over with joy, just being in the mere presence of their spouse. Like you're not going to have that honeymoon mentality all the time. The times where our prayer does spring from an inner longing, that's the exception. So the rule is much different. So he goes on to say, if we are to take our relationship with God seriously, we need to see that prayer is not merely an expression of the inner life that survives and grows on its own, but is also a service to be performed in faith and obedience. In other words, it must be willed and practiced. And I stress that last one, practiced, because we actually have to work on it. Lesson number 2. What is lesson number 2? Oh, this is establishing a regular schedule for prayer. Yeah, freaking bookmark. There we go. All right. So as we grow in this practice, it's helpful to have a schedule to pray at fixed times during the day. So it could be in the morning and evening, for example. I mean, those two are like the most probably the highest recommendation is to pray in the morning and in the evening. Also, I mean, you could say like a quick prayer before school or before you engage in a certain task. Um, but it's vital to adopt. Well, first of all, sorry, I skipped ahead. Um, Before or after meals is another good time. Um, but it's, whatever suits your routine. So, for example, I am probably the worst. At least I'm in the running for the worst morning person on the face of the earth. Um, but in a certain way, like I just don't even feel like I'm awake for at least the first hour or two when I wake up in the morning, unless I'm like thrown into something kind of hectic like school, where it's like when the students walk in the room, like I have to be awake, so I am to a degree. But if left to my own devices, like right now, uh, I'm just a absolute mess until like I've been awake for like 4 hours or so. So morning prayer is not really suitable for me. So I pray, uh, say a prayer before or after meals, but I focus more on evening prayer and night prayer. So I mean, if you're a morning person, then you may, and like it's the exact opposite for you, like you're just kind of out of it at night, then don't take that time to get like the meat of your prayer time in. Do it in the morning. But if you're like me, then you may want to focus more on that, more on prayer at night rather than in the morning. Like I've tried to, like when I was teaching at Newark Catholic, one of my conference periods was third. Yeah, it was third period. So like even then, I would go to the chapel, and it was a big struggle for me to, like I just kind of felt out of it. Um, but if I was to go to the chapel at like 8 p.m. or even midnight, like I'm wide awake and I'm ready to, like I'm more capable of uh, being present with God. All right, but now, so yeah, do whatever suits your routine. But it is vital to adopt the right attitude outwardly and inwardly. Um, so we have to be composed, recollected at the start. So to begin our prayer, we have to be composed and recollected. And during our prayer, we have to be disciplined. So a good idea would be to throw your phone across the room, or maybe not throw it, but at least put it gently on a table or somewhere away from you so you're not tempted to check it. Because it could be a situation where it's like if you're in the habit of always checking your phone, you may not even realize that you're doing it. So you have to be disciplined during it. Lesson number 3. Okay, this is about self-deception with prayer. So when it comes to the routine and the way we pray, there's no universal right answer. What I mean by that, well, crap, I was supposed to add something to that. I'm saying there's no universal right answer. I'll explain that in a second. So first bracket. Okay. Sorry, let me start over. When it comes to routine and the way we pray, there's no universal right answer. But whatever routine one may adopt, one should carry it out honestly and conscientiously. Okay, so what that means is, well, it's like, saying that people have different needs. Like just similar to the way people learn differently, people can pray differently. It's not meant to sound like egotistical or permeated by some relativistic ideology, because it isn't. Like, prayer should be nurturing. It should be refreshing and good for you. So if what you're doing isn't working, you should consider changing it up. However, you really need to be honest with yourself with that, because, well, for the simple reason of, if, like, for example, if you don't really pray that often, and if you're not, like, kind of used to meditating or taking time for meditation and or praying the rosary, like, it takes practice to kind of get into that mode. Like, you can't just do it on the fly and do it well. Maybe you can, but that would be a gift from God. And so it's like, you don't want to just give up really easily. Like, I'm not saying that. However, okay, here's an easy way to explain it. There's no right method. The essential thing is the thing that measures whether or not your prayer is good or not is whether or how much you love God. So, like, that's gonna determine how great your prayer is. That's gonna determine, your holiness. It's not going to be like, if, say, well, I pray the rosary every day, but while praying it, I'm thinking about the news, or I'm thinking about all of the things that I have to do later that day. It's like, that's not really praying the rosary. You're outwardly saying it, but it's not. Yeah, I think you get the point. Okay, he goes on to say, he clarifies this. In matters of prayer, we are only too apt to deceive ourselves because, generally speaking, man does not enjoy praying. He easily experiences boredom, embarrassment, unwillingness, or even hostility. Everything else appears to him more attractive and more important. He persuades himself that he has not got the time, that there are other more urgent things to do. But no sooner has he given up prayer than he applies himself to the most trivial tasks. We should stop lying to God. Better to say openly, I do not wish to pray, than to make such excuses. Better not to resort to specious justifications, such as, for instance, tiredness, but to declare, I do not feel like praying. This may sound decorous, but at least it is the truth which leaves the way open, whereas self-deception does not. Okay, so that's why it's so important to be honest with yourself. Like, do you really not have the time to pray? Even like a quick minute or something? Or do you really just not feel like it? So definitely be honest with yourself. All right, now lesson 4, prayer is essential to faith. So, don't deceive yourself. Prayer is essential to our faith. We shouldn't be self-indulgent or think we're too busy. We got to do what duty and necessity require of us, because without prayer, our faith grows weak. We can't remain Christian without praying, just as we can't live without breathing. The two go hand in hand. All right, lesson 5. I'm skipping a couple sections here, by the way. Not because they aren't important, but just because I want to give you the basics without trying to overwhelm you. Clean Canteen. Lesson number 5. Prayer is only as good as the preparation for it. Now, you may think this is a bit radical, or even wrong or incorrect or however you wish to say it. But whenever we choose to do a serious task, like, we have to be prepared for it and concentrate on the demands we have to face. Like, you don't show up for a concert or for a movie you want to see at the last second. Like, you want to get there on time, so you don't get stuck with a terrible seat, and you definitely don't want to show up like 20 minutes late. Also, I mean, think about sporting events, like you're playing a game. Excuse me. You don't want to be thinking about I don't know even what you guys think about. You don't want to think about TikToks or whatever they are while you're up to bat, or you're playing a game of basketball or football or something. Like, you want to be focused, so you have to kind of prepare yourself for that. And so, I mean, the thing here is that you don't want to go to these things or events or engage in these activities and spend your time there thinking about other things. So a mental prep is needed. And it's the same thing with prayer. In fact, I think it's even more so with prayer because, well, God is hidden. And as Guardini says, God is hidden. And so we have to seek after God, and He's only found with faith. All right. Lesson 6. Now, Lesson 6 is composed of 4 parts. It's about recollectedness. So, recollectedness. So he gives 4 descriptions of it. Says he describes recollectedness as composure and concentration. He describes it as becoming present. He describes it as being unified. And he describes it as awakenedness. Now, I'm only going to go through part of this because, I mean, it's a few pages, and I'm trying to keep this fairly short, so we'll see. All right, but right, I'm going to read you part of this because it's really good. He's a fantastic writer. So it says, usually we are distracted by the diversity of objects and events, agitated by friendly or hostile contacts, assailed by desires, fear, care, or passion. He is constantly bent on achieving something, or on warding off something, on acquiring or rejecting, on building up or destroying. Man always wants something, and to want means to be on the way, either toward a goal or away from a danger. This has been so ever since man existed, and is even more so with modern man. Man likes to think of himself as active, striving, and creative. In this he is only partly right. He would in fact be even more right if he thought himself as a restless being, incapable of standing still or of concentrating, as one who uses up people, things, thoughts, and words without, however, finding fulfillment, as a being who has lost the link with the center and who, with all his knowledge and abilities, is a victim of chance. This restless being wants to pray. Can he do it? Only if he steps out of the stream of restlessness and composes himself. Okay. Be honest here. This is very difficult for me to read because, as you know, I have ADHD, so I am very distractible. So like I'll play a game on my phone while I'm trying to grade, while watching something on Netflix. So what he says definitely cuts to the heart, or to the core, for me, anyway. And it's very difficult. And I know at least some of you, I think we all struggle with it to a degree, some so more than others. So this is going to take like a lot of effort on our part. Like, it means we have to discard and neglect all of these desires, thoughts, etc., and concentrate on the one thing which, for the time being, matters. It's the only thing that matters, and that's prayer, or that's God. Because you're not praying for the sake of praying, you're praying for the sake of God, and to build your relationship with Him. And so, like, you have to get to the point where, for that time, for that set of, God is the only thing that matters. So that means we have to detach ourselves and say, nothing concerns me right now except for my time of prayer. I try to tell myself that when going to Mass, like when I try to get to Mass a little early to kind of mentally prepare myself, saying like, I'm not here to see who else is here. Like, I'm not here to look around at my friends. I'm here for God, Him alone. So I want to encourage you, to say that, for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, however long you set aside for prayer, say this amount of time set aside for you and for you alone, so everything else is excluded. That way I am completely free and completely dedicated to this one task. And we have to be honest with it, as usual. I mean, if you think about it, if prayer is a relationship, prayer is a relationship with God, a conversation with God. So imagine you're conversing with one of your very good friends. Which would be a more genuine conversation, saying, I really don't, I wish I wasn't here, I want to be doing something else, however harsh that may be, or faking it, saying mindless things without putting any thought into them. Like, which would help you grow in your relationship? Well, it's going to be the honest one, even if it's difficult to say, difficult to hear. Or it's like, it doesn't even have, I don't mean that to say like, saying, hey, I don't really like you. That's not what I mean. Because if you're friends, then you do like that person. Saying, my mind is elsewhere, like I've got so much stuff on my mind and I can't concentrate and I'm really sorry. Like, saying that versus looking at the paper while the person's talking to you, like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, what else is going on? Like, that's not gonna improve your relationships. Or I guess it's more fitting if, instead of a newspaper, you got your phone on Twitter or whatever. Like, you've all had encounters with people, I'm sure, who aren't paying attention to you. And instead, they're paying attention to their iPhones, whether it's going through email or whatever. And I've done it too. I try not to, but it's important to, when we start to pray, to be honest with ourselves. God, what's actually on our hearts. Okay, recollecting this as becoming present. Oh, actually, I was going to read the last paragraph of this. Because this is, it's funny. I think it's kind of funny. But it's really true. So, no sooner has he started praying, or has he started to pray, than, conjured up by his inner unrest, all sorts of things clamor for attention. A task at work, a conversation, an errand, a newspaper, a book, a tweet, a Snapchat. All these suddenly appear most important, and prayer seems a sheer waste of time. But no sooner has he stopped praying than there is plenty of time, and he fritters it away with useless activities. To recollect oneself, which springs from unrest, and to become still, to free oneself of everything which is irrelevant, and to hold oneself of God, who alone matters now. Boom, roasted. But he's spot on with that. Like, as soon as you need to be aware that, like, when you try to collect yourself, it's going to become twice as difficult to actually collect yourself. Like, it's the same thing as, like, when you try to stay still. Okay, so I had a MRI on my rotator cuff a few years back, and so they put me into this thing, and, like, in this, like, tunnel thing, and, like, I'm breathing fine, but then they say, oh, also you can't breathe heavily or deeply, that's going to screw up the MRI. I think it was the MRI. And as soon as they said that, it became difficult for me to not breathe deeply. Like, as soon as they said that, it's like, I'm hyperventilate, like, it was just, it became really difficult. If they hadn't said anything, I probably would have been fine. So you have to understand that that at first, when you try to do these things, you're going to get a lot of pushback from yourself. Persevere through it. All right. So the next thing he says is recollecting this as becoming present. So we can phrase it differently. Instead of saying recollecting this as composure and concentration, I want you to say becoming present. So what that implies is that what matters is that we should be present when talking about speaking to a friend or a sibling or a parent, and they're looking at their phone, they're not looking at you. No, I mean, or if someone's speaking to you and you're on your phone, not really paying attention. Like, you want to be present. So instead of giving into the unrest that tries to take hold when we are about to or have started to pray, which is to say, instead of yielding to the urge to be somewhere else, doing something else, we need to hold our ground, remain at the place where these things really matter, the place where God calls to the self. So he continues, in this exacting stillness, man begins to feel uncomfortable and tries to run away. Always he flees from the holy here, where the call reaches him and where everything is in its right place. It would appear that the more firmly man is rooted in the world, the more adrift he becomes from the place which really matters. So if you want to pray, you have to recall yourself from everything and everywhere and become and remain present. This remaining, that remaining part, that's the most difficult. For only on rare occasions do we meet with an experience so definite and compelling as to hold us make us unwilling to remain for a while. But everything depends on this ability to stand still and to be present with full inner awareness. So think about like the watching a movie or something that just has you in its grips. Like you're not thinking about anything else. You're just entirely focused on that. You're not fidgeting, nothing. Like all of you is just completely present with what you're watching. Like that's the kind of attention level, or that's the amount of being present that we're striving after in prayer. All right, now the whole thing about recollectedness being unified, I mean, it's a similar thing, okay? It's you can also phrase it as, well, one part of me wants to do this and another part of me wants to do that. And so recollectedness is about unifying, being completely present or being fully present to someone. You are unified, like that example with watching a movie or a show that just is totally engrossing. It's like you're entirely unified at that point. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not wanting to do anything else. You're not fidgeting. You're not cracking your knuckles. It's like your entire being is on the same page. And so that's basically what that part is about. And then he speaks of it as also being awake, like being completely ready to respond. That's another way to put it. Okay, now I've gone over this stuff with you, and listen, you're going to fail miserably when you try to do it. That's a fact. But I just don't want you to get discouraged. I would say, like, if you're really, really uncomfortable with it, with trying to work on being still and being recollected, try it for 1 minute. Then maybe the next day or even the next week, so maybe try 1 minute a day for a week. Then push it up to 2 minutes or 5 minutes or so. Don't strap yourself down for an hour if you don't do it at all, because that's a recipe for disaster. You'll get burnt out, then you won't do it ever again. Like you have to incrementally improve. So that is what I would say, or that's kind of my parting advice to you, is to strive for incremental improvement. And I know I struggle with that sometimes because I want to take on these like huge tasks and do them well. Like I think about the areas where I'm just not fulfilling my potential. And instead of trying to do it a little bit better, over the span of a month or even a year, I want to just do it all at once and just go from running 5 miles an hour to running 30 miles an hour or whatever. I don't know. That you get the point. So instead, just try to focus on doing it for maybe a minute at a time, a minute a day. Then go to 2 minutes, 3, 5, 10, 15. Like you'll notice this if you start praying the rosary, you'll notice your improvement if you do it consistently. That like in the beginning, like maybe in the first week or so, or even the first couple days maybe, that wow, like your mind is totally elsewhere. when you're praying the rosary. You're not able to engage in the mental aspects of it, the mental prayer, because like when you're praying the rosary, yeah, you're saying like while you're saying the Hail Marys out loud, you're actually supposed to be reflecting on the mysteries of Christ. And so, like in the first few times you do it, you're gonna find that wow, you're not thinking about the mysteries of Christ at all. You're thinking about something else. But as you continue to do it, you'll find that you're actually able to meditate on the mysteries of Christ. It becomes a lot easier for you. So I just want to emphasize that this is a practice. It's something that we have to will. It's not just going to show up on its own. Only in very, very rare cases does, according to St. Teresa of Avila or St. John of the Cross, those two are like the two most highest authorities on prayer. According to them, God only grants infused contemplation to like a beginner in very, 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 very rare cases. Like it's not something that happens, that just happens the vast majority of times. So you gotta work on incremental progress. And if you start now, geez, you're going to be so much more aware of things as you continue to grow older. Yeah, it's going to be crazy if you start now. So don't try to overdo it. Take a minute or so a day, and then increase your time a little bit per day or per week or whatever works for you. All right, that's all I've got. So have a fantastic summer. I'm gonna go get Skyline chili because I'm hungry and Skyline's delicious. Have a nice summer.